Okay, we'll probably go ahead and get started. My name is Tristana Perkle, and I'm the director of the School Garden Support Organization Network. And today I am joined with Kelly Wilson and Tiffany Torres, who are going to be sharing a webinar all about replicable teacher professional development framework. I'm really excited to myself learn from them as we do a webinar about how to do successful professional development webinars. If you could go to the next slide, please, just a couple of housekeeping items. See, I'm not seeing, there we go, awesome. So this webinar will be recorded and we will be sharing it via email after, and it will also be available in the recording library on our website. We will be sharing a copy of the slide deck. It won't be coming in chat, but it will be coming in the follow-up email so that you have all of the slides and relevant links. And then we would love to receive your feedback. There's also a little kind of section that I'll be going into where we'll be asking you specifically about your needs and resources in relation to professional development. So would love if you could share your feedback with us after the webinar. And then finally, we will be having some time for questions at the end. So as your questions come up, please utilize the Q&A section. The Q&A section is a little bit easier for us versus the chat, but please utilize the Q&A section to ask your questions as they come up, and we will be organizing those and asking them at the end. I'm just going to share a little bit of an overview about the SGSO network, share some updates with you all, and then I'm going to be passing it off to Kelly and Tiffany. So if you go to the next slide. This is the third of a full series from the Growing School Garden Summit, highlighting presentations that were given at the summit in April. The summit was hosted by Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation in partnership with the SGSO Network and Life Lab. So we're really excited to kind of continue the learning and bring the summit presentations to more audiences. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the upcoming schedule. We had 2 previous webinars, so check out those in our recording library. And we've got 3 more coming up in January, February, and March. We're taking a break for the winter holidays in December. And specifically, next slide will highlight our next one, which is Music in the Garden. Allowing us to learn from Simon of Hot Toast Music Company, all sorts of multi-sensory music opportunities to utilize in your garden. So another way to bring learning into the garden on January 18th. Next slide. So one of the things that we are working on constantly is the development of our promising practices. Our promising practices are little bite-sized opportunities to dive into best practices all around specific topics within effective school garden programming. And these are a really great kind of resource roundup that have been organized by various different experts across the country and across the field. We are in the process of developing and expanding our promising practice all about effective professional development, which is the topic of today's webinar. So we thought you all would be the best people to ask more about what are your greatest needs when it comes to running effective professional development, and what are your favorite resources that you feel everyone should know about. We would love to hear, and we will be utilizing those to both organize our promising practice that will be launching next year, as well as just kind of share the various resources that you all know about. So that will be a part of the survey. So if you fill out the survey, that will you'll have a chance to share with us. So I'll put that link into the chat in just a moment. And then finally, just want to make sure you know about our new newsletter. This is an opportunity to get kind of bite-sized information all about one topic within school garden programming. And I'll put the link in the chat to sign up for our newsletter. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our wonderful presenters today to take it off. Pass it over to you, Tiffany and Kelly.
Sure. Thanks, Tristana. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with you today. So today, Kelly and I will be presenting on Growing Garden Leaders, Not Just Garden Leaders. This is a replicable school garden leadership training series for your SGSO. And like Tristan said, my name is Tiffany Torres. I am the State School Garden Specialist with Florida Agriculture in the Classroom and co-founder of the Florida Farm to School Collaborative. I'm also happy to be serving on the SGSO-Network Governance Board, so glad to be here in multiple capacities. And I'll let Kelly introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Wilson, and I'm currently working as a food systems specialist with the University of Florida IFAS Extension, Lee County, and working with the Florida Farm to School Collaborative as well. And today, our webinar objectives for this session is that you all would understand the framework that we've been using to enhance school garden sustainability, explore the webinar components and interactives tools, again, that have served us really well so that you can replicate it in your own educator professional development. And finally, we would love for you to apply this in the creation of your own school garden leadership training kind of session or series in your region or state locale.
Right, so we have a lot to dig into today, so let's get started. And we wanted to give you a little bit of a background first off on who has hosted this school garden leadership training series in the state of Florida. So there are many partners. The first partner is Florida Agriculture in the Classroom. Florida Agriculture in the Classroom is a statewide nonprofit funded through the specialty license plate known as the Ag Tag, whose vision is to ensure that every student in pre-K through 12 education is aware of and appreciates agriculture and natural resources in Florida. And I just want to point out that this is a small nonprofit. We have a staff of 3 people. So when you're thinking about hosting a statewide webinar series, it's important to think about partners and their scope and mission. And then
Yeah, and the second kind of key partner in this collaboration is the University of Florida IFAS Extension Family Nutrition Program, which is one of the SNAP education implementing agencies in the state of Florida. So FNP for short, along with Florida Ag in the Classroom, co-developed this webinar series. And as an organization, FNP works to provide free nutrition education and support initiatives that increase access to healthier foods in schools and communities. And, we all know that school gardens is a great way to do that. And this is how it fits into that scope. But really, again, emphasizing the point that looking for diverse partnerships that can offer kind of unique strengths and resources. It's a lot easier for a nonprofit to purchase things, for example, in a giant institution that has very specific grant requirements like SNAP education. So really kind of playing to the strengths of each organization has served us well.
Right, and we're proud to share that one of the outcomes of this collaborative webinar series is the development of a newly formalizing statewide school garden and farm to school collaborative. So Florida is one of the few states without a formal farm to school network, and collaborating on this series together has really allowed us to get clear on our shared goals and for farm to school across the state and start projects like the Florida School Garden Census, which you can see here in the bottom left. We're partnering with the Department of Agriculture on that. As well as create statewide resources that were specific to the webinar and then will be promoted more broadly, like the Florida School Garden Planner. So in the future, we hope to obtain grant funding, which will allow us to continue these and other projects, but just wanted to plant the seed that hosting successful professional development for school gardens can lead to more outcomes than just people being educated in those in that realm.
And we are going to, now that we shared a bit about us, we're going to ask about you. And we're going to use a tool called Mentimeter. It's an online kind of interactive engagement tool that we've used a lot in our webinar series. So we wanted to bring these tools to the webinar today so that you get a chance to use them as well. So you access this tool by phone, computer, tablet, whatever you have. You can use the QR code that you see on the screen, or you can navigate to www.menti.com and type in this numeric code that you see right here. And yeah, so that will give you access to this presentation to allow us to interact a little bit with one another and hear from you about who you are, where you're coming from, all that good stuff. So I'm going to switch the screen share to the Mentimeter presentation, but you'll still have this code available on the screen. So I will switch that over right now and present our Mentimeter presentation. And you should see at the very top the code with the numbers. And I see we have 4 people right now popping in. So as I'll let you all come on. I think there's about 65, 66 participants. Right now we have 14 in the Mentimeter. So I'll let some more come on. But the first question is, where do you work with school gardens? So you on your phone or your computer screen, you can see you have a little dot, and you can move that dot around the map to indicate your location. We know that people are coming from all over the country, and apologies in advance if you are coming from outside the United States. Feel free to put your location in the chat if it's not represented on the map. But we've got some Chicagolanders, Arizona. Got about 32 more people. So yeah, this is really great. It's neat to see that we have a wide representation. I see that nobody is in Florida with me and Tiffany, so I'm glad at least we're sharing this outside of the state where we've been doing it. But yeah, this is a really neat tool. There's all sorts of questions that you can ask on Mentimeter. You know, and we'll be looking at some of those later today. So because I see that we have about 42, I'm going to go on to the next question. But thank you so much for showing us where you're located. So the next 2 questions, oh, you've already answered them. Okay, I'm slower. But anyway, the next 2 questions are demographic questions that we ask here at the University of Florida IFAS Extension, just for reporting purposes and getting to know our audience better. So if you prefer not to answer, totally respect that. There's a little spot for you to say that you'd rather not. But thank you so much for responding. And we also have a racial demographic question as well. So please fill that out. Again, if you prefer not to answer, please say so. And again, we kind of wanted to demonstrate and model what we've been doing and the tools that you could do if you have any you know, reports that you need to do for your nonprofit, any kind of organization that you work for. This could be a tool to integrate that into your webinar series. So I'm going to move on to the next question, which is a bit more fun. We want to hear from you about what you hope to gain from today's session. So this is an open-ended response question. So you can just type in that little box to say why you came today, what you're hoping to gain, what you hope you'll leave here with. So we see strategies and resources, new ideas. Maybe we only have 2 brave souls that have ideas. Okay, more. Hoping to develop stronger PDs for teachers. Just interested in what else is going on. All right, well, I hope that we meet these expectations today throughout the course of our webinar. And thank you so much for responding. So I'm going to stop the Mentimeter and we'll go back to the PowerPoint. And if you have additional things you want to add, feel free to chat, to put them in the chat.
All right, so now that we've done that and we've gotten to know each other a little bit, we wanted to go ahead and give you some background as to how the series emerged and why it's unique, in hopes that you can take away some of these things for your own professional development. So just a little brief history here. In 2016 through 19, this series kind of originally started as something called the Garden Educator Training Series. This was a monthly series that was in person, located at county extension offices across the state of Florida. It included networking time, as well as a lot of homework assignments for in between meetings. We gave out a lot of printed materials to supplement kind of the technical gardening knowledge that we were trying to teach. And we also gave each participant a living history binder that they could take back to their school, and then with all those resources, do kind of a train the trainer and get their team trained up in the monthly services that they're receiving with us. And the 3 spheres that we touched on at that point were gardening knowledge, curricular connections, and community engagement strategies. We also had a lot of community garden folks joining us at the time. And in 2020 with COVID, we wanted to come together and figure out how to meet the statewide and virtual. So that emerged as the School Garden Leadership Training Series that we'll be talking about today, held on Zoom meetings, not Zoom webinar like we're using today. It also included networking time and a Google Drive folder with shared resources, so similar to the printed but online, with the goal of building a statewide school garden network as well. And then in 2022 and 23, we kind of shifted a little bit and we're doing 2 virtual webinars, and we got really specific about our action objective that we wanted folks to walk away with. So it's a little bit more focused content. We'll go into detail about that shortly. So today we'll be talking about this monthly year-long training webinar series that we hosted. And our broad internal objectives of this training series were really to increase the adoption of school garden program best practices, which are comprised of many of the action objectives that you see here on the right, as well as to foster the creation of the school garden network in Florida, like we said, to do that organically. So then in 2022, so we wanted to communicate that externally, actually. So this is our purpose statement that you can see here. This training and networking experience is designed for Florida school garden leaders of all levels to build gardening confidence, foster collaboration among leaders, and strengthen garden programs for long-term success. So you can see we have the gardening confidence is tied to that kind of traditional gardening technical know-how. Fostering collaboration is more about the networking, and the strengthening gardening programs is the sustainability, which we'll be speaking about in terms of our 3 spheres of sustainability later. And in 2022, we looked at our survey data at the end of this series, and we'll go into detail about that too. But we found that there were some action objectives that scored slightly lower. So then the following year, we designed a series that, like I said, is much more specific. So school garden leaders will manage their school garden program to hold a tasting and harvest celebration with students during the school year. So that's what we're focusing on this year, and it's a slightly different model. But we wanted to give you that kind of internal and external view, because that's been really successful in our marketing and promotion. And as a result of the training series, we really have grown a statewide school garden network organically. So we're proud to say that there's over 300 school garden projects participating across the state, across 40 counties in our state. We've also had folks from other states join us, as well as people from other countries. And you can see on the map here, there's a variety of different types of people that are attending, everything from parents to ECE, to administrators, to university extension professionals in a variety of urban and rural contexts, as well as direct and indirect educators. And
Yeah, and we, as Tiffany mentioned, we did a post-series evaluation, and we found that the participants that responded, 77 of them, were quite pleased with the monthly year-long series model, with 94% of them recommending this to others and 89% of them saying that it actually helped them to start or sustain their school garden program. So, that's why we're bringing it to you all today. We hope that that this is also helpful to the school gardeners and educators in your region if you were to replicate it. So because you're here today, we just want to know why. What is your why? We shared a lot of our purpose statements, our action objectives, but we'd love to know why you want to offer teacher professional development or a series like this. So you can type some of those responses in the chat and we'll read them out. And I'm not sure if people are typing in the Q&A or in the chat, but
and again, we're trying to model different things that we would be doing in our webinar. So lots of chats throughout.
Y'all, looks like the chat is disabled. Let me work on that.
Oh, okay.
Thanks,
Well,
sorry about that. We didn't realize
no worries.
that.
While Tristina, you do that, we can maybe you all can just add things to the chat and we can go to the next slide.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so just to kind of further expound on the series framework that we have, we're using a kind of recipe metaphor to talk about building your school garden leadership training. And so the ingredients of this, this recipe, the soup that we're making together, consist of the 3 spheres of sustainability, varying webinar components such as tools for interactive engagement that we're trying to model here, like Tiffany said, partnerships that host the series and facilitate it, kind of contribute to the content, and internal planning tools to allow those partnerships to function well. And finally, evaluation. So those are all kind of key ingredients of making the school garden leadership training series happen. And then the broth that we are kind of, that's holding the soup all together, that is ideally permeating all parts, is this accessibility and inclusion piece. Yeah, so this is not only kind of the ingredients of our recipe, but also serves as the agenda for the content moving forward today that will briefly touch on each one of these components.
Right, so our first ingredient, it's corn. It's got the juice. It's the 3 spheres of sustainability. So when thinking about what makes a school garden program sustainable, you can see this word cloud here. This is from some of the folks that participated in our webinar. We asked them, and you can see from a lot of the words here, they're very people-based. It's very community-based. And this is something that I haven't seen throughout a lot of school garden professional development frameworks, is that tier of leadership skills. So we wanted to create a model that incorporated all 3 of these. So this is what we call the 3 spheres of sustainability, and we incorporate them into each of our webinars that we host. So we have gardening knowledge representing our, technical gardening skills, crops, planting, seasonality, all of that. And then curricula connections is something that we want to offer both curricula in our Google Drive folder, but we also want to tie it back to the seasonality or the gardening knowledge that we're teaching about. And leadership skills would be that 3rd tier that really hits on things like integrating the garden into school culture, or creating and growing your school garden team, creating SMART goals, community engagement. And really at the end of the day, what we want to promote is that in every seat, there's a leader, and we are creating opportunities for teachers and educators across the state to think of themselves as leaders, to think of themselves as community organizers and ambassadors for a school garden and wellness. So this is the 3 spheres of sustainability. And we use these graphics throughout each of our webinars as well to help our participants understand and kind of follow the flow of what we're talking about. So this is a sample agenda using the 3 spheres of sustainability. You can see that under leadership skills, we have our purpose, vision, and goal setting, building your garden team. And then we also talked about site selection and garden design under our gardening knowledge section. And for curricula, we wanted to weave all that together. So we detailed a curriculum called Plan It, Map It that helps students make a plan for planting outside later on. And to give you an even better taste of what our monthly sessions look like, this is some of the sessions for the 2021 and 22 school year. So you can see that we included in each month something that fits into those 3 spheres. And it doesn't have to be that 1/3 of it is gardening and 1/3 of it is curriculum, but we just want to make sure that we're maintaining those touch points throughout the season. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, and to kind of return to this broth, the water of our soup is the accessibility inclusive aspect of our webinar series. So on the accessibility side, we asked the question, how is the information being accessed? So we provided Spanish interpretation during the live webinars, as well as we recorded that Spanish interpretation and provided some resources in Spanish as well. And that came from a request from a participant. They wanted Spanish interpretation. We also offered closed captioning on the YouTube recordings and tried to make sure that that closed captioning was accurate to what the speaker was saying. And in the inclusion, on the inclusion side, we wanted to be intentional and thoughtful about who is speaking, who are we highlighting in the state, thinking about the stories that are being shared, and also how is power being shared between partner organizations, between maybe a direct school garden educator and school garden support organization staff person, and really highlighting all of those experiences, in line with what Tiffany has said about, in every seat there's a leader, and we want to demonstrate and model that with our webinar inclusion. You can go to the next slide. And our onion, which consists of many layers, are the webinar components. So these are the tools for interactive engagement, various networking opportunities that we provided, online resources, and then we also offered professional development with continuing education credits for those who requested it. So, looking at the slide, we're now going to dive deeper into each one of these. So starting with tools for interactive engagement, and then moving on through the rest of them to kind of highlight what the participant experience was like in the webinars. So as you can see, this is the full list of the salt and pepper that flavored our webinar. Next slide. So we relied pretty heavily on guest presenters. So you can see here in the slide that we had a chef from the Department of Agriculture, some teachers, direct educators in the school garden, as well as district level educators that are supporting farm to school initiatives at the district level, in addition to nonprofit organizations, such as botanical gardens, or there's a wide variety of partners that were present on the webinar, and we really wanted to highlight different voices, and rely on others' expertise. We didn't have to know everything about a specific topic, but we relied on those who did in the state to bring that to light in our webinars. And similarly, we also liked to spotlight schools and teachers in their school garden programs, kind of as an example to ground the content. So instead of speaking in general about school garden design, we shared an example about how the garden purpose is kind of integrated into the school garden design by showing kind of a case study, such as this one from the School of Arts and Sciences in Leon County. So, there's a lot of different ways that you can spotlight schools and teachers, but we definitely like to highlight what's going on around the state, which is, again, part of growing that network. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Sure. And we also had live demonstrations. So you can see a couple of screenshots here. This would be a little bit more interactive than just a talking at you traditional presentation, because we're actually doing things in front of the camera. So you can see on the left here, we have what, where, when, planting with students. So we're going through some actual curriculum there, as well as demonstrating the tools and what you might need to do it in your classroom. And then from Plant to Plate, we have a screenshot here from Chef Paula, who talked about harvesting and eating from the garden, and actually prepared ahead of time some kid-friendly recipes for us to look at. And then this third example is one of my favorites. This was from Drip Drip Hooray. So we had irrigation basics and beyond. We really focused on that for this webinar month. And we had a square foot gardening raised bed there and a bunch of irrigation parts, and we put them in front of the camera and actually showed close up what each of those parts looked like. And that flowed really well into our next portion, which is pre-recorded videos. So we found pretty quickly early on that it was very difficult to rely on Wi-Fi or data, doing live things out of an office setting. So we did try it going out into the school garden and things like that, but definitely recommend pre-recorded videos as much as you can. And so for that previous example of Drip Drip Hooray, we also supplemented that live demonstration with a pre-recorded video where we talked about how to set up your irrigation using an automated pump, basically. And so that's what this video is here. We put them on YouTube for viewing later, and then show them live for about 3 to 5 minutes during the webinar as well. And this one on the right is from Skin of the Earth, where we talked about soil and vermicompost and got up close and personal with worms. And then again, following that theme of, interactive activity, that salt and pepper that's going to make your webinar really exciting and engaging, we wanted to highlight a Jamboard. So this is an interactive group platform, which we'll be using a little bit later in our presentation with you today. But the way that we use this in our webinar series is we had a right part, right place breakout room activity. So we used the breakout rooms and we created a different slide using Jamboard for each of our breakout rooms. And each breakout room had a different facilitator in it. And they walked everyone through using the tips that we heard from the videos, and screenshot from the video here, how to actually set up irrigation for your school garden. So we had a mock garden bed with all these plants and different designs, and then all of these tools where people could move them around and assemble their own garden bed and irrigation system. So that was a really fun way to get people involved, but also to see the diversity. You know, the answer is usually in the crowd, and to see like how people would want to set up their gardens. And the second interactive group platform that we use often, that we already used today with you, is Mentimeter. And we wanted to point out a couple different things about Mentimeter here. First is that there's a free version. We do recommend the paid version. It has a little bit more flexibility and it's not too expensive. But you can ask yes or no questions. You can see here, this is focusing on webinar that we did on composting. So what ratio of brown to green is preferable? That's a hard yes or no question. And then that can be used as a quiz competition. So you can see here in the upper right, we have people voting or earning points based on how many questions they get right and how quickly they answer them. We also can use Mentimeter to gauge folks' like opinions about things or comfort levels, to gather information about what they want to learn. So in this example, we have rank these school composting goals in order of importance to you. And we asked them this at the beginning of the presentation to kind of tailor the presentation more towards them as we went. And also it can be used in lieu of PowerPoint as well. So this is just an informational slide in the lower right here about pallets and bin systems and kind of some pros and cons for that system. So we really like Mentimeter as a way to shake it up, get people engaged, and kind of break up the PowerPoint tradition. And also, of course, there's regular Zoom functions. We've used a few of those so far, polling as well as breakout rooms and chats. I'm sure you're all familiar with this at this point, but we did want to point out that, you know, we try to make it as inclusive as possible and have these kind of slides at the beginning, how to join a breakout room, kind of Zoom overall functions. We found that it's been really helpful to use our breakout rooms to dive into the specifics by region. Florida is a big state. We have a lot of different growing zones. So it's been cool to see folks get into different rooms and talk about, you know, in my growing zone, this works, and this growing zone, it doesn't work. So I just encourage you to think about that. It could be something even as simple as like soil differences, but using breakout rooms to have people talk about specifics in their community that isn't just like geographic region. And the other example that we used here is we actually have modeled different curricula on site together in the breakout rooms. So again, the caveat being you might need additional folks to staff those breakout rooms. And we made sure to make a list ahead of time of like kind of a template of what those facilitators can read from so that everybody's prepared. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thanks, Tiffy. Another activity we did was mail kits specifically to have our participants kind of set up a germination activity with us live. So you can see a picture of that in the screen. We germinated some seeds and they got to do it live with us. And so, you know, people had to sign up ahead of time to get the mailed kit, but it was another good way to bring an in-person component to a webinar. Next slide, please. And so kind of in summary, we would love for you all to kind of share what you'd like to do. So we're going to launch a poll right now. I'm going to launch it for you. So you should see the poll in front of you. So could you please select all the tools for interactive engagement you would like to incorporate into your future webinars? So those options are guest presenters, school and teacher spotlights, live demonstrations, pre-recorded videos, interactive group platforms like Mentimeter and Jamboard, Zoom functions, and mailed activity kits. So I see we have maybe 30, 40 people who have responded to the poll. Good job. everyone. And okay, I see that it's slowing down a little bit, so I'm going to end the poll and show you the results. So it looks like the lab demonstrations were the most popular option, but you know, guest presenters, spotlights were also popular too. Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, we've had a lot of success with all of these, and hope you all do well. Best of luck as you continue. So we'll close that poll and move on to online resources. So instead of showing you more slides, we wanted to just do a quick screen share to show you what it looks like on the participant end accessing the online resources for this webinar series. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see what it looks like. So we set up a Google Drive folder that has the resources that accompany the webinar online, so anyone can access it. So this is the full kind of public Google Drive folder with all of our series years. So we're going to go into the 2021 to 22 folder and look at some of the resources. So you can see it's organized by date. We're going to go into the September one, and we again have them all quite nicely organized in the folder. But we created some kind of session-specific worksheets for the webinar series. So if we're talking about how to set a vision for your school garden, we created a visioning worksheet for the participants to fill out after the webinar. And they can access it here. We also, you know, curricula connections is really important. So we have housed curricula in the Google Drive as well. This is a Florida Agriculture in the Classroom lesson.
Hey, Kelly, would you mind Control plus so that you can zoom in a little bit to make it a little larger for folks? There we go.
Is that too much?
That might be a little too big.
How's that? I don't know. Is that better?
One more. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my apologies for the small screen, everyone. Yeah, so kind of in summary, we had some session-specific worksheets, a curricula folder, and going back to our menu, we also kind of, as we went along later in the spring, we started creating what we call a link library. So this is in our January folder, and this is pretty simply a published Google document with all of the links that we shared in our webinar. So we organized it by the 3 spheres of sustainability, and we have all of those hyperlinks right there, so you can find it really easily and return to that after the session is over. We also housed all of our YouTube or all of our recordings on YouTube in a playlist. So this is all 15 that we've done over the past 3 years that are recorded and housed right here, so you can find it really easily. And we're hoping to add some kind of YouTube chapter markers to make these a bit more functional as well as we continue on forward. So those are all of the online resources available to participants in the series. And we did have in our session kind of evaluation, we found that the respondents said that they did use and access these, which was good to know.
Thanks, Kelly. So next we're going to talk about networking opportunities. And this includes our networking and Q&A time. So we incorporated this into every webinar that we did. And we had an hour of content and then 30 minutes of Q&A or just free flow networking. And after the first year, we did receive some feedback that that participants might prefer it not to be recorded and for it to be more open-ended. So we reduced that down to 15 minutes and it's open-ended for this year. And I just wanted to highlight too that we use this run of show document, which we will be pointing out later. But it has a chart here that we use to keep track of questions. I know Zoom webinar is not maybe accessible or affordable to all organizations. We didn't have access to Zoom webinar, so we did use Zoom meeting, and this was a way to kind of use the Q&A function like we're using here today, but on the back end so that we could save all those questions that came up in the chat and have a chat monitor keep them for the end of the webinar. And next, I wanted to highlight our Facebook group for connection. So we started this at the very beginning of our series, and we have over 282 members and growing now. It's a place for celebration, for event promotion, for idea and resource sharing, troubleshooting, and networking. We have teachers posting in there, you know, here's my idea for the semester, What do you all think? There's really is a lot of engagement, and it's just so fun to see what's happening across the state. I think it's been a big support in helping us organically grow our statewide school garden network. All right, and next we're going to talk about partnerships. So a little look behind the curtain, and I wanted to focus now on, these are the functional partnerships. So we went into some of, the presenters that might be in the webinar series with us, but this is who's going to host it. So when thinking about who to host, you want to think about the type of organization, who you might partner with. Are they a nonprofit? Are they a state organization? Are they SNAP-Ed? The scale, so what audience does the organization serve? Are they local, regional, statewide? What kind of connections do they have? And the scope, so what is the organization's mission, and how does their mission align with the goal of the overall series? And then most importantly, I would say capacity. How much time do you actually have and your partners actually have to get this done? My position as state school garden specialist, I would say this is like a good chunk, probably maybe 50% of my job description, scope of work. So it does take some back-end work to organize something this extensive, but also you don't have to do a year-long series, and you could still incorporate some of these successful approaches. So that's what to consider with your partners. We made this little graphic to kind of try to bring that to life with you, for you. So how do you work together with your core planning team? This might be where you want to start. And what are your strengths? What is your mission alignment? Then you would from there go out into your scope, like I mentioned before, with your series objectives coming out of that, and the capacity reinforcing it. Getting really specific about your distribution of labor, which we'll share momentarily, some tools that we have for that. And then flowing into the scale. So how many dates do you want to have throughout the school year? What are the frequency of those? We started with once a month. Now we have 2 for this school year because we have a different objective that's going to drive that frequency. And then lastly, thinking about your promotion plan related to all of that. So then you want to go out and design your content based around the scope and the scale. So this would be things like topic selection, as well as breadth versus depth. So I hope that was a helpful visual graphic. If you want to share in the Zoom chat now, who do you want to work with in your state, region, or territory to host professional development? And that could be someone specific, or it could just be a type of organization. And I'll read those out if I see anything coming through.
4-H,
Oh, yeah,
great
4-H.
partner, good idea.
We definitely partnered with 4-H for different things. University Extension, local garden clubs, BIPOC garden, food justice groups. Awesome. Yeah, again, there's, a room for everyone. It's just being mindful of capacity as well. Master gardeners, school district garden staff, nonprofits, school-based leaders. Awesome. Okay, we're in the essence of time. We're going to keep moving on and talk a little bit about internal planning tools. So we have developed a bunch of internal planning tools to help our scope, our capacity go smoothly with this webinar series. And we want to give those to you. We don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel. So I'm just going to quickly show you a couple of those that we use. These are all different documents that you will have access to in a shared Google Drive folder. And the first one that I want to go over, let's see. So we have, this is the folder as a whole. I already have them open in tabs. So the first one that we made a sample for you is our weekly planning and debrief notes. So this is kind of a template for how to debrief each webinar after you have it, as well as how to plan your sessions and take notes. This is probably our most helpful document. This is our run of show. So everybody who's hosting the webinar has access to this. This is our agenda with our times broken down. And then we have links that are put into the chat according to slides here, so that there's a chat monitor always doing that while presenters are presenting. And then we have our roles and responsibilities document as well. So these are all the different roles that it takes to host a smooth webinar of this scope and scale, as well as links and communication strategies for each. So we hope that these tools, as well as the others in this folder, will be useful for you so you don't have to reinvent the wheel and you can go forward planning an effective school garden professional development training. All right, let me share back. Okay. All right. So with a little bit of time, go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, yeah. So one of the tools that we created that's in that folder is a template for you to go through this entire kind of to plan your whole entire series. So I'm just going to do a quick screen share of what that looks like. So this is to plan your own session. It kind of helps you to organize your selection of session topics, how you can kind of pair those topics with any interactive components, select the partners, guests, and spotlights to reinforce those topics, and then finally kind of put together your session flow with times. And I wanted, we also have some other resources here, but we turned this document into a Jamboard activity. And we are not going to have any time right now to go through it together, but I am going to share the Jamboard link in the chat. That way you can get familiar with this platform and kind of play around with it, fill in anything that you might want. So I'm just going to post this link in the chat so you can click on it. You should be able to access and play around with it maybe during our Q&A time or just to be familiar with Jamboard if you haven't ever used it before. It is a great platform. So yeah, I hope that, that in the future, as you apply all this to your own work, this will be useful to you to help yourself get organized.
Thanks, Kelly. And we are going to wrap up by just quickly talking about evaluation so that we can save a few minutes for Q&A. I see a question came in the chat about PD, and we'll make sure to answer that as well. All right. So evaluation, the fun thing that we all like to think about. It is definitely, we had limited resources for evaluation. I'll just be transparent and say that. But it was helpful to think through what we could do on a small scale after each webinar. So we developed post-session satisfaction surveys that were really simple. They were smiley face, meaning you really enjoyed it, it was engaging, or you were kind of meh, or it was a sad face. So there was a variable there, very graphic, easy. This takes 3 minutes. And here are some examples of the kinds of questions that we would ask. This is all available for you in that same Google Drive folder if you want to copy it. And I'll let Kelly talk about next slide.
Yeah, so in addition to the post-session surveys that we did after every single webinar, we also did end of series survey at the end of the school year. So this was kind of primarily to measure any changes that actually happened in the school garden program. So thinking back to our action objectives, did the participants make progress towards adopting these school garden best practices that we hoped they would as a result of this training. But we know that doesn't happen immediately after you attend a webinar. It takes, months to actually make those changes in your school garden program. So, we provided some of the sample language here about the questions that we asked and an example of, their response. We also provided an opportunity for kind of exemplary quotes about their experience. And the survey was more extensive, and the entire survey instrument is also available in that Google Drive folder. So you wouldn't need to reinvent the wheel. It's available for you to take and adapt, kind of use as you see fit.
Right, and both surveys were done in Qualtrics. In case that's helpful information for you, we really thought that it was functional and was easy to use for folks and available through the university system as well. All right.
So we do have a final 2 questions just to get your kind of feedback and see how this session was received. So again, trying to model evaluation in the actual webinar series. So if you could log on to Mentimeter again, we would definitely appreciate that. So I'm going to share my screen. It's just the same one. So if you're already logged in, then you should still have access to it. So we're going to present the Mentimeter presentation. And this first question is about knowledge gain. So it's a scalable question. You can say from 0 to 10 on each of these topics how much you learned. This is anonymous, so if it's a 0, we won't know. If it's a 10, we won't know. So feel free to just kind of put in your responses there. And again, we're kind of exploring additional ways to incorporate evaluation into webinar series. And so this really was an experiment. And so hopefully you'll be patient as we're learning something new as we do this too. So I see that we have some responses coming in, and this is a pretty neat, it's another example of a Mentimeter question. They have a lot of good ones in there. I will say that we do have a paid account, which allows us to ask a couple more questions, and it allows greater access to the platform. But I'm going to go on to the next question to see what you all would like to apply. So which one of these webinar components do you plan to apply to your work with your school garden support organization? You can select multiple of these options as well. So see, we have about 9 respondents, and the tools for interactive engagement is quite popular, as well as the 3 spheres, which is really exciting. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and close the Mentimeter poll, but I really appreciate you and your feedback.
Awesome. So we'll just close with our last slide here so that we can make sure to address some of these questions in the chat. We just want to say thank you for joining us. We hope that you'll continue to grow with us. So we have another one of our school garden leadership training webinars coming up on December 1st, and the link is there, which we can also provide in the chat if you would like to register for that and see what it's like to join us live. We also have all of our previous webinars on YouTube if you'd like to see how those looked in real time. And we have our Facebook group for connection, as well as our resources and slides in the Google Drive folder available to you. We have both the internal resources that we've made, like blank copies for you, as well as we could give you access to the public folder as well. So our contact information is available on the slide, and we're happy to talk in detail about any of this if you're interested in our promising practices for professional development with school gardens. And I think with that, we'll move into Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I imagine folks would love your contact information. I know you just had on the slide, but if you could put it into the chat, I think that would be super helpful for everybody. Please go ahead and add some questions to the chat. We do have 2 short questions, I imagine, but if you have any other, please add them to the Q&A. One is, are you invited into schools to do a garden professional development for a whole school or for the district? If you could share more on if you're invited into schools to do the garden professional development. This was from Barbara.
Sure. So Florida Agriculture in the Classroom does provide in-school teacher professional development, but with this model, we've kind of stuck to, this is a webinar series that we wanted to do monthly. So it could definitely be translated into in-person trainings. And this year we're experimenting with that. We have about 5 in-person trainings around the state. We're doing a little bit of a tour. The hurricanes has thrown a bit of a wrench into that with us. But we're pursuing that, and the hope is to create, one agenda that can be replicated across the state in different locations, and then being mindful to make adjustments for any locale, like northern regions, central regions, southern regions. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Have you ever offered clock hours to teachers for participation in your trainings?
Yeah, so this was something we explored pretty heavily. We offer certificates for professional development. We also have a professional development survey. So essentially we request that they write a couple different things that they have learned from the session. That could be attending live, or it could be watching the webinar recording and then submitting it to us via Qualtrics. So we can give you a copy of that PD survey if you'd like. Then we make the certificate and mail it out to them. We did explore models for promoting the series internally with school districts. We found that every school district is totally different. So it just depends on whether it meets the kind of criteria for what they would want to approve or not. But I would recommend, we had some success talking with Department of Education and getting a list of all of the different PD contacts for each school district in the state. And then we simply emailed them the marketing and promotion materials that we created and said, would you be willing to put this on your calendar to promote it internally and get it approved for a PD? So that was a pretty good strategy. I would say maybe half or less of them were able to put it on their internal calendars, but the ones who did, we had a much higher rate of participation in those counties.
Great, thank you so much. We just got a question about recording, and I'll just pop in and say that the recording will be shared via email to everyone who registered. It'll also be available in our recording library on our website. And then we have a couple more questions. Let's see, did you have many of the same participants throughout the series, or did most people pop in and out month to month?
I would say we had a mix.
I would say we had a mix too.
There were some that were pretty consistent, like they came every single time. There was a good kind of core group, and especially on our lower attendance sessions, it was our regulars who came, but there were others who popped in and out, and definitely found that like kind of the inaugural sessions had much higher attendance. So the ones, in September and January at the beginning of the semester had a lot higher attendance rate than, by the time we got to December and April, the attendance dropped.
Great, and we have another question. Why are you no longer having any focus on community gardens? That was something you mentioned in your presentation.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when this program was originally designed, it was hosted primarily by the SNAP-Ed Organization Family Nutrition Program in the state of Florida, which at the time was serving audiences of both school gardens and community gardens. And there was just a high demand for community garden resources. And I found that over time that the approaches can be very similar in terms of the strategies that we use for community organizing at a community garden or organizing within a school setting, kind of within that leadership sphere of sustainability that we were talking about. So there is a lot of overlap, and we also found that it was really helpful to invite the community garden representatives and kind of pair them as volunteers at the school garden sites. However, I think we really just wanted to scale that back, especially with having Florida Agriculture in the Classroom come on. Their mission and vision is not specifically related to community gardens. It's more school gardens and childhood agriculture education. So yeah, just being mindful of who the host organizations are and what the capacity is and how to grow that network that we were talking about statewide.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Tiffany. Really appreciate your expertise. I think as you've seen, or I hope you can see in the chat, folks have really enjoyed this presentation. If you don't mind just going to the next slide, we'll share that you can follow the SGSO network at SGSO Network on any of social media platforms. Be sure to check out our upcoming webinar series, all within the Growing School Garden Summit series. And feel free to email me, Tristana@sgsonetwork.org at any time. And we would love your feedback. So putting it into the chat just one more time, this helps us, as Kelly and Tiffany have demonstrated, this really helps us to continue to bring effective webinars to you. And specifically for this webinar, y'all are the best people to help us build a future promising practice document that's focused all on effective PD, kind of gathering a lot of these best practices that Kelly and Tiffany have shared today and any others that you all have. So please fill that out if you have time. It should probably take you 5 to 7 minutes. And I will go ahead and close us out for today. Appreciate you joining us and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.